pain of a sexless marriage. Why should you listen to this story? Because this story will help you learn English in a simple and easy way. This is a real-life story that many people live, but very few people talk about. So listen till the end and learn English with a real story. I never thought I would be the kind of person who would talk about her marriage like this. For a long time, I believed my story was ordinary. Nothing dramatic, nothing broken. From the outside, everything looked fine. We had a home, shared responsibilities, and a life that seemed stable. People saw us together and assumed we were happy. And maybe, in the beginning, we really were. When we first got married, there was warmth between us. We talked easily. We laughed often. Being together felt natural, not forced. We were still learning about each other, but there was excitement in that learning. I felt chosen. I felt important. I felt wanted. At that time, I truly believed this feeling would stay forever. In those early days, time felt different. Even when we were busy, we found moments for each other. Small moments, but meaningful ones. Sitting together at night and talking about our day. Sharing thoughts before falling asleep. Listening to each other without checking phones or rushing away. These moments made me feel emotionally close and safe. Marriage at that time felt like partnership. We were building something together. We made plans. We talked about the future. Even simple things felt special because we were doing them together. I remember thinking that this is what marriage is supposed to feel like. Comfortable, caring, and full of understanding. Nothing felt missing. Life slowly started becoming more demanding. Responsibilities increased. Work took more energy. Days became longer. We started feeling tired more often. But I did not see this as a problem. I told myself, this is normal. Every couple goes through busy phases. I believed that this was just part of growing up and building a life together. At first, these changes were small, almost invisible. We still talked, but our conversations slowly changed in nature. Instead of deep talks, we discussed daily tasks, bills, schedules, work issues, things that needed to be done. It felt practical, responsible, adult. I did not realize then that something important was quietly shifting. We were still together physically. We still lived in the same space. But emotional closeness requires more than sharing a home. It requires attention, presence, and connection. And slowly, those things started to fade. I noticed that our conversations became shorter. We talked less about feelings and more about duties. We stopped sharing what was happening inside us. When something bothered me, I kept it to myself. When something bothered my partner, they also stayed quiet. We were avoiding conflict, but we were also avoiding honesty. At that time, I still believed silence meant peace. Then came the quiet moments that felt different. Moments when we were sitting in the same room but not really together. Moments when we were close, yet emotionally distant. There was no argument, no anger, just a quiet gap that I could feel but could not explain. Nights changed the most. We still went to bed at the same time, but it felt different. Conversations before sleeping became rare. Sometimes we turned away from each other without thinking about it. Not because we were upset, but because it had become normal. That realization hurt more than a fight would have. I started making excuses in my mind. Maybe it was stress. Maybe it was tiredness. Maybe tomorrow would be better. I believed love meant patience, so I waited. I told myself that closeness comes and goes, and that things would return to normal. Weeks passed, then months. The warmth we once shared did not disappear suddenly. It slowly faded, like a light that grows dim over time. You do not notice it at first, but one day you realize the room is darker than before. I started feeling confused. I was married, but something felt missing. Still, I could not point to one clear problem. We were not fighting. There was no betrayal. There was no major mistake. Everything looked fine on the surface. That made it harder. When there is a clear problem, you can talk about it. You can try to fix it. But when everything looks fine and still feels wrong, you start questioning yourself instead. I began wondering if I was asking for too much. Maybe marriage naturally becomes quiet with time. Maybe this emptiness is normal. I looked at other couples and assumed they had their own problems too. I told myself no marriage is perfect. But even while telling myself these things, a quiet pain stayed with me. I missed feeling close. I missed feeling emotionally connected. I missed feeling important in that way. But I did not know how to explain this feeling. How do you tell someone you love that you feel distant from them? How do you talk about something that has slowly disappeared without knowing exactly when it left? Every time I thought about speaking, I stopped myself. I did not want to create problems. I did not want to sound demanding. I did not want to hurt my partner. So I stayed quiet. Silence felt safer than uncertainty. The hardest part was pretending that everything was okay, smiling in front of others, acting normal in daily life, doing what was expected of me. Inside, I felt like I was slowly shrinking. I was present, but not truly seen. I started questioning myself. Maybe I had changed. Maybe I was not interesting anymore. Maybe I was not attractive enough. When communication disappears, the mind fills the gap with self-doubt. And those thoughts can be very cruel. Sometimes I tried small ways to reconnect. A gentle word, a caring gesture, a moment of closeness. But when those efforts were not noticed or returned, I pulled back again. Each quiet rejection made me more careful. Over time, I learned how to protect myself emotionally. I lowered my expectations. I stopped hoping too much. Not because I did not want closeness, but because hoping hurt more than accepting distance. Still, deep inside, I knew something was wrong. Marriage should not feel this empty. Love should not feel this distant. And companionship should not feel lonely. This was not a marriage without a past. There had been love. There had been closeness. And losing something slowly hurts more than losing it suddenly. You keep waiting for it to return, even when it doesn't. At night, I often lay awake, staring at the ceiling, asking myself questions I never asked out loud. Is this how the rest of my life will be? Is it wrong to want closeness? Is silence better than honesty? I did not have answers, only feelings. Feelings I kept locked inside because I did not know where to place them. I did not want to hurt my partner. I did not want to damage the relationship, but I was slowly hurting myself. This is how it began, not with anger, not with betrayal, not with hate. It began with silence, a quiet distance that grew between two people who once felt close, a distance that was never discussed, but deeply felt. And at that time, I still believed this silence was temporary. I did not know yet that this was only the beginning. At first, I truly believed the silence was temporary. I told myself it was just a phase. Life was busy. Work was stressful. We were tired. I believed that with time, things would naturally return to how they used to be. I held on to that hope quietly. But as days passed, that hope started to feel heavy. I noticed that even when I wanted to talk, I stopped myself. The words stayed in my mind, but never reached my lips. I would sit next to my partner and think, should I say something now? And every time, the answer was no. The timing never felt right. If my partner looked tired, I stayed quiet. If they looked busy, I waited. If they looked calm, I did not want to disturb the peace. Slowly, asking questions became something I kept delaying. Not because I did not care, but because I cared too much. I was afraid of many things. I was afraid of rejection, afraid of being misunderstood, afraid of hearing answers I was not ready to accept. Sometimes, it felt easier to live with silence than to face a truth that might hurt. I told myself that a good partner should be patient. A good partner should be understanding. So I tried to be both. I listened more. I complained less. I adjusted myself. I thought this was love. But being quiet did not bring me peace. It only made me feel more alone. There were moments when my partner noticed my distance and asked if everything was okay. Those moments scared me the most, because that was my chance to speak. And every time, I said yes. I said everything was fine, not because it was true, but because I did not know how to explain what was missing. How do you explain the absence of something that used to be there? How do you talk about a pain that has no clear shape? I worried that if I spoke, I would sound needy. I worried that my feelings would feel like pressure. I worried that my partner would feel blamed. And I did not want to hurt them. So I chose silence again. Over time, silence stopped feeling like a choice. It became a habit. The questions inside me did not disappear. They grew heavier. Questions like, did I do something wrong? Have I changed? Am I no longer wanted? Is this just a phase? Or is this our new normal? These questions had no answers, because I never asked them out loud. When you do not speak, your mind creates its own answers, and those answers are rarely kind. I started blaming myself. Maybe I was not attractive anymore. Maybe I was boring. Maybe I was expecting too much. My confidence slowly faded, and I did not even realize it at first. I compared myself to others without meaning to. Couples on social media. Stories I heard from friends. Even strangers who looked close and comfortable together. I wondered what they had that I didn't. Then I felt guilty for thinking this way. I was married. I was supposed to be grateful. I had stability. I had a partner. So why did I still feel empty? At night, my thoughts became louder. The house was quiet, but my mind was not. I replayed old memories, trying to understand when things changed. There was no clear moment. No single event. Just a slow drifting apart that neither of us talked about. Sometimes I imagined having the conversation. In my imagination, I spoke honestly. I explained my feelings. My partner listened. They understood. Things got better. But imagination is safe. Reality is not. In reality, I did not know how my partner would react. I did not know if they would understand. That uncertainty kept me silent. Love made things more complicated, not easier. Instead of speaking, I adjusted. I lowered my expectations. I stopped hoping too much. I focused on work and responsibilities. I kept myself busy. Being busy helped distract me, but it did not heal anything. There were days when I felt okay, when the silence felt manageable. On those days, I convinced myself that I could live like this, that this was enough. But there were other days when the silence felt unbearable. On those days, even small things hurt deeply. A missed moment, a quiet rejection, a lack of response. Each one felt like confirmation of my fears. I learned how to hide my disappointment. I learned how to smile at the right moments. I learned how to act normal. But inside, I was carrying a sadness that no one could see. The hardest part was not knowing if my partner even realized the distance. Maybe they were dealing with their own struggles. Maybe they were tired. Maybe they thought everything was fine. The lack of communication left too much space for assumptions. I wanted reassurance, but I did not ask for it. I wanted closeness, but I did not say it. I wanted honesty, but I was not brave enough to start it. So the cycle continued. Sometimes I felt angry with myself. Why couldn't I just speak up? Why was I so afraid of one conversation? But fear is not always logical. Fear comes from the risk of losing something, even when that something already feels distant. I convinced myself that love means sacrifice, that patience would be rewarded, that things would change if I just waited long enough. Waiting became my way of coping, even though it slowly drained me. There were moments when I felt invisible, not ignored on purpose, but overlooked. Being unseen hurts differently than being rejected. It makes you question whether you matter at all. I started walking carefully around my partner, avoiding certain topics, avoiding vulnerability, avoiding honesty. Marriage began to feel fragile, not safe. I missed feeling open. I missed being able to talk freely. I missed emotional closeness. Physical distance often begins with emotional distance, and emotional distance begins with silence. Still, I stayed quiet, because silence felt like control. If I did not ask questions, I would not hear answers I was not ready for. If I did not speak, nothing would change. And change felt terrifying. But silence has a cost. It builds walls between people. Walls made of unspoken words and hidden feelings. Walls that become stronger with time. I did not realize it then. But this silence was slowly pushing me toward a breaking point. A moment where staying quiet would hurt more than speaking up. That moment was coming closer. This part of my story is about that silence, about the questions I swallowed, the conversations I avoided, the truth I was afraid to face. At that time, I still believed silence was protecting my marriage. I did not yet understand that it was quietly breaking me. At first, I did not call it loneliness. That word felt too strong. I told myself I was just tired, or emotional, or overthinking. It felt easier to explain my feelings in simple ways than to face the truth. But slowly, that feeling grew. And one day, I realized I was not just tired. I was lonely. I was married, but I felt alone in ways I never expected. Not alone in the house, not alone in daily life, but alone inside myself, alone with my thoughts, alone with feelings I did not know how to share. There is a special kind of loneliness that comes from being with someone who feels far away. It is different from being single. When you are single, you expect loneliness. But when you are married, loneliness feels confusing. You wonder how you can feel this way while sharing your life with someone. We spent time together every day. We shared meals. We shared responsibilities. We talked about schedules, plans, and small problems. But something important was missing. I felt like we were living parallel lives, walking in the same direction, but never truly meeting. I noticed how quiet I had become. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I felt there was no space for my feelings. Conversations stayed on the surface. We talked about what needed to be done, but never about us. Never about what we were becoming. When we sat in the same room, the silence felt heavy. It was not a comfortable silence. It was the kind that makes you feel invisible. I felt like my presence did not change anything. Like I could be there or not be there, and it would not matter. That thought hurt deeply. Social situations made it harder. When we went out together, people assumed we were happy. They saw us as a normal couple. They smiled at us. Sometimes they even said we looked good together. I smiled too. I played my role. But inside, I felt disconnected. I felt like I was pretending, like I was acting in a life that did not fully belong to me anymore. At home, I tried to stay busy. I filled my time with work, screens, and small distractions. Being busy helped me avoid thinking too much. But when the house became quiet, all the feelings returned. Nighttime was the hardest. Lying in bed felt different now. The distance was not just physical. It was emotional. I missed feeling close. I missed feeling wanted. I missed the kind of connection that makes you feel safe and valued. Sometimes I lay awake, staring into the dark, feeling a sadness I could not explain. I was next to my partner, yet I felt completely alone. Over time, this loneliness started changing me. I became more quiet, more careful, more guarded. I stopped sharing my inner world. I stopped expecting comfort. I learned how to keep my feelings to myself. I noticed how often I said, "I'm fine," even when I was not. I learned how to hide disappointment behind a smile. I learned how to act normal even when I felt empty. I started questioning myself more deeply. Was I too sensitive? Was I asking for too much? Was I being ungrateful? These questions stayed in my mind, and without answers, they slowly damaged my self-confidence. I compared myself to others without meaning to. Couples on social media, stories I heard from friends, even strangers holding hands. I wondered what they had that I didn't. And then I felt guilty for thinking that way. I told myself I should be grateful. I had stability. I had a spouse. Many people had less. So why was I still unhappy? But gratitude did not erase loneliness. You can be grateful and still feel alone at the same time. That was a difficult truth to accept. I also noticed how my body reacted to this loneliness. I felt tired more often, emotionally drained. Small things felt heavier than before. Carrying unspoken feelings takes energy. Pretending takes energy. Being strong all the time takes energy. Slowly, I felt exhausted. I tried again to connect in small ways. I showed interest. I listened carefully. I shared stories from my day. Sometimes I reached out with kindness or warmth. But when those efforts were not returned, I felt discouraged. Each unanswered attempt made me pull back a little more. Distance felt safer than rejection. I did not stop caring. I stopped hoping. The hardest part was missing someone who was still there. Missing the version of my partner who used to be present. Missing the closeness we once shared. Mourning something that was not officially gone. I often wondered if my partner felt the same way. Maybe they were lonely too. Maybe they were also struggling. But without communication, we stayed trapped in our own thoughts. Silence does that. It keeps people close physically, but far emotionally. I felt emotionally touch-starved, even though I never used that word. I just knew something important was missing, something human, something that made me feel connected. this loneliness also affected how I saw my future. I started imagining years like this, decades like this, growing older together, but never truly close. The thought scared me. I asked myself quietly, can I live like this forever? That question stayed with me. I felt stuck. I did not know how to change things. I did not know how to start the conversation. I did not know how to fix something that was never openly broken. I started feeling like I was fading, like my needs did not matter, like my feelings were too much. That kind of loneliness slowly damages your sense of worth. Even in moments when we laughed together, the emptiness returned. The laughter felt temporary. The distance always came back. It became clear to me that companionship without connection is not enough. This part of my story is about that loneliness, the kind that exists even when you are not alone, the kind that slowly changes who you are, the kind that makes you question your place in your own marriage. I did not realize it then, but this loneliness was pushing me toward something, toward a decision I could no longer avoid. I was reaching a point where staying silent was becoming more painful than speaking up. I was not there yet, but I was getting closer. And deep inside, something was beginning to shift. I did not wake up one day suddenly brave. There was no dramatic moment, no loud argument, no big fight that forced me to speak. The change came slowly, built from months of silence, loneliness, and unanswered questions. For a long time, I had learned how to live with the emptiness. But one day, I realized something important. I was living, but I was not really alive. That thought scared me. There was a quiet moment when everything outside looked normal. The house was calm. The routine was the same. But inside me, something felt different. I felt tired in a way sleep could not fix. Emotionally tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of holding everything inside. I asked myself a question I had been avoiding for a long time. How long can I live like this? This time, I did not push the question away. I did not distract myself. I let it stay. And the more I thought about it, the clearer something became. I was afraid of two things. I was afraid of speaking up, and I was afraid of never speaking up. One fear was about the present. The other was about the future, and the fear of the future felt heavier. I thought about years passing like this, about growing older together but never feeling truly close, about sharing a life without sharing my inner world. That thought made my chest feel tight. I realized then that silence was not protecting my marriage anymore. It was protecting my fear. I had been patient. I had been understanding. I had waited. But patience without communication had slowly turned into self-neglect. I asked myself another hard question. Who was protecting me? That question changed something inside me. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel a little anger. Not anger at my partner, but anger at the situation, at the silence, at the fact that my feelings had been waiting so long to be acknowledged. Along with that anger came sadness, deep sadness, because I still loved my partner. This was not about falling out of love. It was about feeling alone inside love. That is one of the hardest places to be. I started preparing myself mentally, not for a fight, not to demand anything, but to be honest. I practiced words in my head, simple words, honest words. I reminded myself that wanting closeness is not wrong. Wanting to feel connected is not selfish. Wanting to be seen is human. I also reminded myself that my partner might not even realize how deeply this silence was affecting me. Silence does not communicate pain. It hides it. Expecting someone to understand unspoken feelings is unfair to them and to me. That thought gave me a small sense of clarity. This conversation was not just about me. It was about us. Even if it was uncomfortable, even if it was difficult, it was necessary. There were moments when fear came back strongly. Moments when I thought, maybe this is not the right time. But then I remembered how many times I had already said that. The right time never comes on its own. I realized that waiting longer would not make the conversation easier. It would only make the silence heavier. The night before I planned to speak, I barely slept. My mind was full of thoughts. What if the conversation goes badly? What if nothing changes? What if this opens doors I cannot close? These fears felt real, and they were valid. But there was also something else growing inside me. A quiet strength. A feeling that staying silent was no longer an option. The next day, everything looked normal. The house, the routine, the calm. It felt strange knowing that inside me, a storm was building. I did not choose a dramatic moment. I did not want drama. I wanted honesty. A simple moment, a quiet space, a chance to speak without interruption. Even then, I hesitated. I almost backed out. Fear whispered, maybe later. But I had learned something important. Later is often just another word for never. I reminded myself that this was not about winning an argument. There was no argument yet. This was about sharing my inner world, about letting my partner see a part of me I had hidden for too long. I took a deep breath. My heart was beating fast. My hands felt cold. These were signs of fear, but also signs that something important was about to happen. I was not sure how my partner would react. I was not sure if they would understand. I was not sure if this conversation would fix anything. But I was sure of one thing. I could not continue pretending that everything was fine. This realization was the true turning point. Not the conversation itself, but the decision to stop hiding, to stop shrinking myself to keep the peace, to stop sacrificing my emotional well-being for silence. I felt like I was standing at a crossroads. One path led back to quiet suffering. The other led to uncertainty, but also to honesty. I did not know where the second path would take me, but I knew I had already walked the first one for too long. This part of my story is about that inner decision, the moment when fear and courage met, the moment when I chose truth over comfort. The conversation itself was still ahead. The outcome was still unknown. But something had already changed inside me. I was ready to speak. And once you reach that point, silence no longer feels safe. It feels heavy. It feels unbearable. You realize that even if honesty hurts, it also has the power to heal. I did not plan a perfect speech. I did not write anything down. I only knew one thing. I could not stay silent anymore. Silence had already taken too much from me. We were sitting together, just like any other day. Nothing looked different from the outside. The house was quiet. The routine was normal. But inside me, everything felt heavy. I took a deep breath. I reminded myself that this moment was not about blame. It was not about winning. It was about truth. I started slowly. My voice was calm, but it felt strange to finally say the words I had kept inside for so long. I said that I wanted to talk about something important, something I had been carrying for a long time. At first, my partner looked confused, not angry, not defensive, just surprised. gave me a little courage. I said that I was not unhappy with life in general. I said that I appreciated many things about our marriage. I wanted to make it clear that this was not an attack. This was honesty. Then I said the part that mattered the most. I said that I felt lonely, not alone in the house, not alone in responsibilities, but lonely inside the relationship. The words felt heavy, but also relieving. Saying them out loud felt like putting down a weight I had been carrying for months. I explained that this loneliness did not come from one big fight or one big mistake. It came from silence, from distance, from feeling unseen and emotionally disconnected. I was careful with my words. I spoke about my feelings, not accusations. I said, I am not blaming you. I just want you to know how I feel. After that, there was a pause, a long pause. My partner did not speak right away. I could hear my own breathing. My heart was beating fast. Part of me was afraid of what would come next. Another part was just relieved that the truth was finally out. When my partner finally spoke, their voice sounded softer than I expected. They said they did not realize how deeply I was hurting. They said they knew things were different, but they did not understand how much it affected me. That moment was emotional, not dramatic, not loud, just real. For the first time in a long while, it felt like we were truly present with each other. I talked about how the lack of closeness had slowly changed me, how it made me question myself, how it affected my confidence, how it made me feel invisible in my own marriage. Saying these things was hard, but it was also freeing. My partner listened, really listened. They did not interrupt. They did not defend themselves. They did not turn it into an argument. They just listened. Then they shared their side too. They talked about stress, about emotional exhaustion, about feeling disconnected in their own way. They admitted that they had also been avoiding difficult conversations, just like I had. That realization hurt, but it also made sense. We were both silent. We were both afraid, and we were both disconnected. We did not solve everything in that one conversation. That was never realistic, but something important happened. The silence was broken. For the first time, we named the problem instead of ignoring it. We talked about how closeness had slowly faded, not because of a lack of love, but because of distance, stress, and unspoken feelings. Hearing that made me feel less alone, less like the problem was only me. I told my partner that I was not asking for perfection. I was not asking for instant change. I was asking for effort, for honesty, for connection. That conversation did not magically fix our marriage. There was no sudden transformation, no perfect ending, but it changed the direction. It opened a door that had been closed for a long time. After that day, things were not suddenly easy. There were awkward moments, emotional moments, times when we did not know what to say. But there was also something new, awareness. We started talking more, not just about daily tasks, but about feelings, slowly, carefully, honestly. We learned that rebuilding connection takes time. It takes patience. It takes effort from both sides. Some days felt hopeful. Some days felt confusing. Some days were still hard. Healing is not a straight line. But now, I was no longer invisible in my own story. I also learned something important about myself. I learned that my feelings matter. I learned that silence is not always strength. I learned that speaking up does not make you weak. This experience taught me that a sexless marriage is not just about physical absence. It is often about emotional distance, about fear, about lack of communication, about two people slowly drifting apart without meaning to. I know now that staying silent almost broke me, and speaking up saved something inside me, even if the future is still uncertain. This ending is not perfect. It is not a fairy tale, but it is real, because sometimes the real victory is not fixing everything. Sometimes the real victory is finding the courage to finally tell the truth. And once the truth is spoken, you are no longer alone with it. This is where my story ends. Not with all the answers, not with certainty, but with honesty. The pain did not disappear overnight, but it was finally seen, and that changed everything.